The Zephyrian Empire stretched across 12 star systems like a vast spiderweb of power and control. For 3,000 years, the Empire had maintained perfect order, through careful balance and ancient traditions. Each species knew their place in the grand design. The telepathic Etherians managed communications and diplomatic relations. The militaristic Corvan Confederacy provided security and enforcement. The merchant Trelawney Syndicate controlled trade routes and resource distribution. At the center of it all sat the Obsidian Throne on Nexus Prime, the magnificent capital world that gleamed like a jewel in the heart of civilized space. Crown Prince Vextar stood before the massive crystalline mirror in his preparation chamber, watching his reflection shimmer in the polished surface. His tall angular frame was typical of his species, with skin that shifted between deep purple and silver depending on the light. Forearms moved gracefully as his attendants fitted him with the ceremonial robes of succession. Today would mark the end of his long apprenticeship and the beginning of his reign as Emperor of the known galaxy. The coronation ceremony had been planned for months. Representatives from every major species would attend to witness the transfer of power from his dying father to the new ruler. It was more than tradition, it was a requirement. The Empire's stability depended on all member species accepting the legitimacy of their new emperor. Without their recognition, rebellions could tear apart everything his ancestors had built. Vextar's personal aide, a nervous Trelawney named Zix, approached with the day's final schedule. The small, fur-covered creature's whiskers twitched as he spoke in rapid, high-pitched tones. Your Majesty, all the major delegations have arrived except for one. The humans are running late, but their ambassadors sent word they will arrive before the ceremony begins. Humans? Vextar's voice carried a note of mild interest. He had heard of this species but knew little about them. They were newcomers to galactic politics, discovered only recently in a small system called Sol. Their planet was called Earth, a modest world with a single moon. Everything he had read suggested they were unremarkable. No special abilities like the Etherians, no military might like the Corvans, no commercial empire like the Trelawney. They seemed to be included more out of courtesy than necessity. Yes, Your Majesty. Captain Sarah Chen leads their delegation. Our intelligence reports indicate she served in their military before becoming a diplomat. The humans appear to be enthusiastic about joining galactic civilization. Zix's tone suggested he found human eagerness somewhat amusing. Vextar dismissed the matter with a gesture of his lower right hand. Minor species often sent representatives to important ceremonies, hoping to gain favor or trade agreements. The humans would likely follow the same pattern. They would bow appropriately, offer modest gifts, and request minor concessions. It was all very predictable. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime was a marvel of engineering and artistry. The dome stretched over 300 meters high, supported by pillars carved from single pieces of black stone that seemed to absorb light. Thousands of beings filled the ceremonial space, each delegation seated according to their species' importance in the imperial hierarchy. The Etherians occupied the prime positions closest to the throne, their translucent forms glowing softly in the dim light. The Corvans sat in perfect military formation, their armor gleaming and weapons ceremonially displayed. The Trelawney merchants clustered together, constantly whispering about trade opportunities even during such a solemn occasion. Emperor Zalthex, Vextar's father, lay upon a floating platform near the throne. The old ruler's body was failing, his once mighty form now frail and translucent, but his mind remained sharp, and his eyes followed every movement in the hall. He had ruled for over 4 centuries, and his wisdom had kept the empire stable through numerous challenges. Now it was time to pass that responsibility to his son. The ceremony began with the traditional recitation of the imperial charter, spoken in the ancient Zephyrian tongue by the High Priest of the Eternal Order. Each major species then came forward to renew their oaths of loyalty. The Etherian ambassador approached first, her mind voice resonating in the thoughts of all present as she pledged her people's continued service. The Corvan general followed, his massive frame making the stone floor tremble as he knelt and offered his ceremonial sword. As the Trelawney trademaster completed his merchant oath, a minor commotion near the entrance caught Vextar's attention. A small group had entered the hall, clearly the human delegation that had been delayed. They moved quietly toward an empty section reserved for minor species. their simple clothing a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and armor worn by other delegates. Captain Sarah Chen was smaller than Vextar had expected. Most galactic species were either much larger or much smaller than the average Zephyrian, but humans seemed to fall somewhere in between. She wore a dark blue uniform with minimal decoration, and her brown hair was pulled back in a practical style. Her dark eyes swept the hall with obvious interest, taking in every detail of the ceremony and the assembled delegates. What struck Vextar most was her expression. While other ambassadors maintained the formal dignity expected at such events, Captain Chen looked genuinely curious about everything she saw. She studied the Etherians with fascination, observed the Corvan military displays with professional interest, and even seemed amused by the constant chattering of the Trelawney merchants. There was something almost childlike in her wonder, yet her posture and bearing suggested someone accustomed to command. The moment for the actual coronation arrived. Vextar stepped forward as his father's weak voice began the ancient words of abdication. The crown of eternity, forged from metals found in the cores of dying stars, was lifted from the old emperor's head by the high priest. The crown itself was a work of art, a circlet of gold and platinum that seemed to pulse with inner light, embedded with crystals that contained the recorded wisdom of every previous ruler. As the crown was placed upon Vextar's head, he felt the weight of history settle upon his shoulders. The crystals activated, flooding his mind with the accumulated knowledge of his ancestors. He saw the rise of the Empire, the conquest of the 12 systems, the careful diplomacy that had maintained peace for millennia. The responsibility was overwhelming, but he was ready. "Behold your emperor," the high priest declared, his voice amplified throughout the hall. The assembled delegates rose as one, offering the traditional salute of loyalty. Vextar looked out over his subjects, feeling the power of absolute rule flow through him. The Etherians glowed brighter in acknowledgement. The Corvans raised their weapons in salute. The Trelawney bowed low while calculating new profit margins, and in the back, almost unnoticed among the minor species, Captain Sarah Chen offered a respectful bow. But when she straightened, Vextar caught something in her eyes that he had not seen in any other delegate. It was not fear, not awe, not even simple respect. It was assessment. She was studying him, measuring him as if she were trying to determine his strengths and weaknesses. The thought passed quickly as the ceremony continued with the traditional feast. Delegates mingled and offered congratulations while servants circulated with delicacies from across the empire. Vextar accepted the homage due to his new position, but found his attention drawn repeatedly to the human delegation. They seemed to be everywhere, talking to representatives from every species, asking questions about trade routes, technology exchanges, and diplomatic protocols. Captain Chen herself approached the throne near the end of the evening. She waited patiently in line behind more important delegates, showing proper deference to protocol. When her turn came, she offered a simple gift, a small device she claimed contained recordings of human music and art. A modest offering from Earth. "Your Imperial Majesty," she said in perfect galactic standard, "we hope to contribute to the cultural richness of the Empire." Vextar accepted the gift graciously, noting how carefully she had worded her statement. She spoke of contributing to the Empire, not serving it, a subtle distinction, but one that suggested these humans might be more complex than initial reports indicated. "Earth's participation in galactic civilization is welcomed," he replied formally. "Perhaps our peoples will find opportunities for mutual benefit." "I believe they will, Your Majesty," Captain Chen replied with a slight smile that seemed to hold hidden meaning. "Humans have always been good at finding opportunities others might overlook." She bowed again and withdrew, leaving Vextar with the strange feeling that something significant had just occurred, though he could not quite identify what. As the celebration wound down and delegates began departing for their homeworlds, Vextar felt satisfied with the day's events. The transition had gone smoothly, all major species had reaffirmed their loyalty, and the Empire remained stable. He looked forward to the challenges of rule, confident in his ability to maintain the order his father had established. But as he retired to his private chambers that night, the crown safely stored in its ancient vault, Vextar found himself thinking about the human captain's parting words. There had been something in her tone, a quiet confidence that seemed out of place for a representative of such a minor species. What opportunities could humans possibly see that? 3 weeks after his coronation, Emperor Vextar received the first troubling report while reviewing trade statistics in his private office. The massive chamber was lined with holographic displays, showing real-time data from across the empire. Usually, these screens painted a picture of steady prosperity and controlled growth. Today, however, several displays flickered with warning indicators that made his four hands pause over the control panels. Your Majesty? His chief economic advisor, an elderly Trelawney named Bex, entered the chamber with obvious anxiety. His normally pristine fur was ruffled and his whiskers twitched nervously. We have a situation developing in the Outer Rim territories. Several trade routes have experienced significant delays and 2 major shipping contracts have been cancelled, without explanation. Vextar studied the displays more carefully. The affected routes all seemed to originate from different systems, but they shared one common factor. They all passed through or near the small Sol system where the humans lived. What reasons were given for these cancellations? He asked, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. That is the strange part, Your Majesty. The client species claim they have found better alternatives. More efficient transportation, improved cargo handling, better prices. Bex consulted his datapad with obvious confusion. The problem is we cannot determine who is providing these superior services. Our intelligence networks have found no evidence of new shipping companies or transport innovations. The Emperor dismissed his advisor and spent the rest of the day studying the economic data personally. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable. Species throughout the Empire were gradually shifting away from traditional Trelawney trade routes and imperial transport systems. The changes were small individually, but together they represented a significant trend that could threaten the Empire's economic foundation. What disturbed Vexatar most was the lack of clear alternatives. When species abandoned old trade relationships, they usually moved to obvious competitors. But these clients seemed to be finding solutions that existed outside the normal galactic commerce networks. It was as if an entirely new economic system was emerging in the shadows of the established order. Meanwhile, on a space station orbiting the 4th planet of the Kepler system, Captain Sarah Chen was conducting what appeared to be a routine diplomatic meeting. The station was modest by galactic standards, designed primarily for fuel stops and minor repairs, but its location made it a perfect neutral ground for sensitive discussions. Across from Chen sat Ambassador Thok of the Andorian Mining Collective, a species known for their practical approach to business and their growing frustration with imperial taxation policies. The Andorians were stocky humanoids with gray skin and enormous hands perfectly adapted for working in deep mines. They controlled several asteroids rich in rare metals essential for advanced technology. The proposition you outlined is interesting, Captain Chen, Thok said in his gravelly voice. But the Empire has exclusive contracts for our mineral exports. Breaking those agreements would be considered rebellion. Despite his words, his tone suggested he was very interested in what the human had offered. Chen smiled and activated a small holographic projector. The device displayed technical specifications for a revolutionary mining technology, automated extraction systems that could increase productivity by 300% while reducing environmental damage to nearly zero. We are not asking you to break existing contracts, Ambassador. We are simply offering you the tools to fulfill them more efficiently. The technology appears impressive, Thok admitted, studying the specifications carefully. But what do humans gain from this arrangement? Your species has no significant mining operations, no need for the increased production capacity. His small eyes narrowed with suspicion. In my experience, gifts this generous always come with hidden costs. You are wise to be cautious, Chen replied. Earth does ask for something in return, but nothing that threatens Andorian independence. We simply request that a small percentage of your increased profits be paid in the form of technological cooperation. Share your mining expertise with our engineers, allow joint research projects, and provide Earth with a modest allocation of rare metals for our own development. The terms seemed almost too good to be true. The Andorians would gain significant advantages while giving up relatively little. Thok spent an hour reviewing the proposed agreement, looking for traps or hidden clauses. He found none. The contract was straightforward, generous, and carefully worded to avoid any conflicts with existing imperial obligations. There is one additional consideration, Chen added as Thok prepared to sign the agreement. This mining technology includes some Earth-developed components that require periodic maintenance and software updates. Our technicians would need limited access to your operations to ensure optimal performance. She paused, allowing the implication to sink in. Nothing intrusive, of course. Just routine maintenance. Thok signed the agreement that day, convinced he was getting the better deal. Within 2 weeks, Andorian mining operations had increased productivity beyond all projections. The Imperial tax collectors were delighted with the increased revenue. The Andorians were thriving with their new profits, and everyone seemed satisfied. Only a careful observer would have noticed that Earth technicians now had regular access to some of the galaxy's most important resource extraction facilities. Similar meetings were taking place throughout the Empire. On agricultural worlds, human agronomists offered revolutionary farming techniques that could double crop yields. On manufacturing planets, Earth engineers provided automation systems that reduced costs while improving quality. On research stations, human scientists shared breakthrough discoveries in quantum computing and energy efficiency. Each agreement followed the same pattern. Humans offered significant benefits in exchange for modest cooperation and limited access. The terms were always fair, the technology was always genuine, and the results were always impressive. Species across the Empire began to look forward to visits from human trade delegations. The Corvan military leadership was the most resistant to human overtures. General Krex, the supreme commander of Imperial forces, viewed any foreign involvement in military affairs as a potential security threat. When Captain Chen requested a meeting to discuss mutual defense cooperation, he agreed only because refusing might seem suspicious to his Imperial overseers. The meeting took place aboard the Corvan flagship, a massive dreadnought that served as the mobile headquarters for the Empire's military operations. Krex was an imposing figure even by Corvan standards, nearly 3 meters tall with thick armor plating that covered his entire body. His red eyes glowed with barely controlled aggression as he studied the small human woman who dared to approach him with business propositions. Humans have no military tradition worthy of discussion, Krex stated bluntly when Chen began her presentation. Your species has been in space for barely a century. The Corvan Confederacy has perfected the art of war over millennia. What could you possibly offer us? His tone made it clear he considered the meeting a waste of time. Chen activated her holographic display without showing any reaction to his hostility. The projection showed detailed schematics for a new type of shield generator, one that could deflect both energy weapons and physical projectiles while consuming 50% less power than current Corvan technology. We offer efficiency, General. Human engineers excel at finding ways to accomplish more with less. The specifications were impressive enough to get Krex's attention. Corvan warships were already the most powerful in the galaxy, but improved shields would make them virtually unbeatable. He studied the technical data carefully, his engineer's mind appreciating the elegant simplicity of the human design. These power consumption figures seem too good to be accurate, he said suspiciously. We would be happy to provide a demonstration, Chen replied smoothly. Earth has prepared a prototype shield generator for testing under actual combat conditions. We can install it on one of your older vessels and you can evaluate its performance personally. She paused, watching his reaction. If the technology meets your standards, we can discuss broader implementation. 3 days later, Krex watched in amazement as an outdated Corvan cruiser equipped with human shield technology effortlessly withstood bombardment that should have destroyed it completely. The shields held against direct hits from plasma cannons, deflected torpedo strikes, and absorbed energy discharges that would have overwhelmed traditional defenses. The power consumption was exactly as advertised, a fraction of what conventional shields required. What do you want in exchange for this technology? Krex asked when the demonstration ended. His respect for human capabilities had increased dramatically, but his natural suspicion remained. Military advantages never came without significant costs. Joint training exercises, Chen replied simply. Human military advisors working alongside Corvan commanders to ensure optimal integration of the new systems. Our technicians need to understand how you fight in order to provide the best possible support. She smiled. Think of it as a cultural exchange program with practical benefits for both sides. Within a month, Human military advisors were embedded throughout the Corvan fleet. They provided valuable. Emperor Vextar discovered the true scope of the problem during what should have been a routine emergency. A massive solar storm in the Rigel system had disrupted quantum communications across 3 star systems, threatening to isolate entire planets from the galactic network. Such storms were rare but not unprecedented. The Empire had protocols for handling communication breakdowns that dated back centuries. But when Vextar activated the emergency communication systems, he received a shock that made his crystalline skin flicker with alarm. The backup networks were functioning perfectly. Not only that, they were operating with better clarity and range than the primary systems had ever achieved. The crisis had been resolved before he even learned it existed. His investigation revealed that the Etherians had implemented their new human-enhanced amplifiers across the entire communication grid 6 weeks earlier. When the solar storm hit, the improved network had simply routed around the disruption without any need for Imperial intervention. The system that had once required central coordination to handle emergencies now functioned independently. Vextar summoned Ambassador Lyris to the palace immediately. The Etherian arrived within hours, her translucent form shimmering with what appeared to be contentment. She had clearly benefited greatly from the enhanced telepathic capabilities the humans had provided. "Your Majesty requested urgent consultation," she said, her mental voice carrying undertones of curiosity. "The communication network upgrades were implemented without Imperial approval," Vextar stated directly. "Emergency protocols require central authorization for any modifications to critical infrastructure." His 4 arms gestured to the displays showing the improved network performance. "Explain how this occurred without my knowledge." Lyris appeared genuinely confused by his concern. "Your Majesty, the improvements were presented as routine efficiency upgrades. The human technology integrates seamlessly with existing systems without requiring any structural changes. We believed such minor optimizations fell within normal operational parameters." Her mental tone suggested she truly saw nothing wrong with the situation. "Minor optimizations?" Vextar's voice rose with royal displeasure. "You have fundamentally altered how the Empire responds to emergencies. Critical systems now operate without Imperial oversight. This represents a significant change in governmental structure, not a simple upgrade." He paused, studying her reaction carefully. "Who authorized these modifications?" The answer that emerged from Lyris's explanation was both simple and deeply troubling. No single individual had authorized the changes, because no single authorization had seemed necessary. The humans had approached each modification as a separate, limited improvement that enhanced existing capabilities without replacing them. Each change appeared minor when viewed individually, but together they represented a complete transformation of how the communication system functioned. Vextar spent the following weeks conducting a comprehensive review of all human activities within the Empire. What he discovered filled him with growing dread. The pattern was the same across every sector. Humans had not conquered anything. They had simply made themselves indispensable to everything. In the military sector, Corvan forces had become completely dependent on human shield technology and tactical systems. The new equipment was so superior to previous technology that reverting to older systems would leave the Imperial fleet vulnerable to any enemy using conventional weapons. General Krex reported that combat effectiveness had increased by 200%, but he also admitted that human technicians were now essential for maintaining peak performance. The economic situation was even more concerning. Trelawney trade networks had become so intertwined with human logistics systems that major shipping routes could not function without Earth-provided navigation and coordination services. The quantum beacons that guided vessels through hyperspace had been upgraded with human technology that improved accuracy and reduced travel time. But these improvements came with a critical dependency. The beacons required regular recalibration using Earth-controlled algorithms. Ambassador Bex delivered the most frightening report during a private meeting in the Emperor's secure chambers. The elderly Trelawney's whiskers trembled as he presented financial data that revealed the true scope of human integration into the Imperial economy. "Your Majesty, we attempted to calculate the cost of removing human technology from our trade networks," he said in a voice barely above a whisper. "The results are catastrophic. Shipping efficiency would decrease by 70%, Navigation accuracy would return to pre-improvement levels, and cargo handling capacity would be reduced to a fraction of current capabilities. The economic disruption would cause immediate shortages across 12 star systems. Vex paused, his small hands shaking as he accessed additional data. Conservative estimates suggest that removing human technology would cause the Empire's economy to collapse within 6 months. Vextar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. How did this happen? How did we become so dependent on a species we barely knew existed 3 months ago? His royal composure was beginning to crack as the full implications became clear. They never demanded dependency, Your Majesty, Vex replied miserably. Every agreement was voluntary. Every improvement was beneficial. Every technology transfer included full training and documentation. The humans have been completely transparent about their capabilities and completely honest about their requirements. They simply offered us better ways to do everything we were already doing. The most disturbing aspect was that the humans had never hidden their activities. All of their agreements had been properly documented, all of their technology transfers had been officially recorded, and all of their personnel assignments had been cleared through appropriate channels. They had operated entirely within established legal frameworks while systematically making themselves irreplaceable. Vextar decided to confront Captain Chen directly. He arranged for a formal diplomatic meeting under the pretense of discussing expanded human participation in imperial governance. The irony of the situation was not lost on him. He was essentially inviting the architect of his problems to propose solutions. Chen arrived at the palace with her usual modest delegation, showing the same respectful deference she had displayed at his coronation, but this time Vexitar looked at her with very different eyes. He saw past the humble exterior to recognize the calculating intelligence that had orchestrated the Empire's transformation. She was not just a diplomat, she was a master strategist who had been playing a game while everyone else focused on individual moves. Captain Chen, Vextar began the meeting with carefully controlled formality. The Empire has benefited greatly from human technological assistance over the past months. However, questions have arisen regarding the extent of human integration into Imperial systems. He watched her reaction carefully, looking for any sign of deception or hidden agenda. I am pleased to hear that our cooperation has been beneficial. Your Majesty, Chen replied with perfect diplomatic composure. Earth remains committed to contributing positively to galactic civilization. If there are concerns about any aspects of our involvement, we are certainly willing to address them. Her tone suggested genuine willingness to cooperate, but Vextar now understood that appearances could be deeply misleading when dealing with humans. My concern is not with the quality of human contributions, Vextar said bluntly. My concern is with the Empire's growing dependence on human technology and expertise. Analysis indicates that removing human involvement would cause significant disruptions across multiple sectors. This dependency was not part of our original agreements. Chen appeared to consider this carefully before responding. Your Majesty raises an important point about technological dependency. Earth has indeed become deeply integrated into Imperial operations. But this integration reflects the mutual benefits our cooperation has provided. We have never sought to create dependency. We have simply tried to be helpful partners. However, she continued with the same calm tone, if the Empire prefers to reduce human involvement, Earth would naturally respect that decision. We could begin immediate preparations for technology transfer and personnel withdrawal. The process would require careful planning to minimize disruptions, but it is certainly possible. Her offer sounded reasonable, but Vextar recognized the underlying reality. Such a withdrawal would be economically catastrophic. The meeting continued for hours as Vextar tried to find some way to reduce human influence without causing chaos throughout the Empire. Chen was unfailingly helpful, offering detailed plans for gradual withdrawal, alternative technologies to replace human systems, and training programs to reduce dependency on Earth expertise. But every solution she proposed would take years to implement and would result in significantly reduced efficiency compared to current operations. By the end of the discussion, Vextar understood that he faced an impossible choice. He could maintain the improved efficiency and prosperity that human involvement had brought, accepting the dependency that came with it, or he could reassert imperial independence at the cost of economy. The crisis that forced Emperor Vextar's hand began with something as simple as a software update. The human technicians responsible for maintaining the quantum navigation beacons throughout the Empire had scheduled routine updates to improve system performance. It was the kind of mundane maintenance that happened regularly without attracting attention from Imperial leadership. But this time, something went wrong. A coding error in the update caused navigation systems across 3 star systems to malfunction simultaneously. Trade routes became unreliable, passenger ships lost their way, and military vessels found themselves unable to calculate accurate hyperspace jumps. Within hours, the affected regions were effectively cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Vextar learned of the crisis when his emergency alerts began screaming across every display in the palace. The situation was unprecedented in Imperial history. Never before had such a large portion of the galaxy been isolated from the navigation network. Panic was spreading through the affected systems as ships found themselves stranded and communication networks strained under emergency traffic. The Emperor immediately convened his crisis council, summoning the highest-ranking officials from every major species. General Krex arrived first, his massive frame radiating barely controlled fury. "Your Majesty, the navigation failure has crippled our fleet operations in the affected regions. Ships are flying blind, unable to coordinate movements or respond to threats. If this continues, we face potential invasion from hostile forces beyond our borders." Ambassador Bex followed with equally dire economic projections. The trade disruption will cause massive shortages within days. Food shipments cannot reach their destinations. Medical supplies are trapped in transit, and manufacturing chains are breaking down completely. The economic damage increases exponentially with every hour the systems remain offline. Ambassador Lyris brought the most troubling news of all. "Your Majesty, our attempts to contact human technical support have failed. Captain Chen's team departed for Earth 3 days ago for what they described as routine consultations. They are currently unreachable, and we have no way to determine when they will return." Her mental voice carried undertones of deep concern. Vextar felt ice forming in his veins as the full implications became clear. The Empire's most critical infrastructure had failed, and the only people who could fix it were conveniently absent. This could not be a coincidence. The humans had not caused the crisis through malice. They had simply ensured that they would be indispensable when it occurred. "Contact Earth directly," Vextar ordered. "Use every communication channel available. This is a galactic emergency that requires immediate human assistance." But even as he spoke, he realized how the words sounded. The mighty Zephyrian Empire was begging for help from a species they had barely acknowledged 6 months earlier. The response from Earth came 12 hours later, transmitted through official diplomatic channels with frustrating formality. Captain Chen's voice carried appropriate concern as she addressed the Imperial crisis team. "The navigation system failure appears to be more serious than initially anticipated. Our technical teams are working around the clock to develop solutions, but the complexity of the integrated systems requires careful analysis to avoid making the situation worse." "How long will repairs take?" Vextar demanded, his royal composure cracking under the pressure of mounting chaos throughout the affected systems. Ships were beginning to collide as navigation errors accumulated, and several colonies were reporting critical shortages of essential supplies. "That depends on several factors." "Your Majesty," Chen replied with maddening calm. "The quantum beacon network has become highly integrated with multiple Imperial systems over the past months. Fixing the navigation problem requires careful coordination with communication networks, defense systems, and economic databases. We want to ensure that our repairs do not cause additional failures in related systems." She paused, and when she continued, her tone carried a note of regret. "Unfortunately, this level of system integration means that repairs cannot be implemented remotely. Human technical teams will need direct access to the primary navigation control centers on Nexus Prime and the affected regional hubs. We are prepared to dispatch emergency response teams immediately if the Empire requests our assistance." Vextar recognized the trap perfectly. The humans were offering to save the Empire from a crisis that their own technology had created. But accepting their help would mean granting them access to the most sensitive control systems on the capital world. It would essentially mean inviting them to take direct control of Imperial infrastructure. The alternative was watching the Empire collapse as Navigation failures spread to other systems and critical infrastructure began failing throughout the galaxy. Already, reports were coming in of secondary failures as stress systems overloaded, trying to compensate for the navigation problems. The cascade effect could destroy galactic civilization within weeks. General Krex provided the final push toward capitulation when he reported that several Imperial fleet units had been forced to use emergency protocols to avoid catastrophic navigation errors. Your Majesty, I have lost contact with 3 destroyer squadrons. They attempted manual navigation and have not reported their positions for over 6 hours. We must assume they are lost in hyperspace. His voice carried the weight of personal responsibility for those missing crews. Vextar closed his eyes and made the decision that would end the Empire as his ancestors had known it. Grant the humans whatever access they require. Authorize emergency protocols to expedite their arrival and provide full cooperation with their technical teams. He opened his eyes and looked around at his council. The Empire's survival takes priority over all other considerations. Captain Chen's response was swift and professional. Earth appreciates the Empire's trust during this crisis. Our technical teams will arrive within 18 hours and begin immediate repairs. We will work with Imperial personnel to ensure minimal disruption to ongoing operations. Her tone suggested nothing more than helpful cooperation, but Vextar understood that he had just surrendered the last vestige of Imperial independence. The human technical teams arrived exactly on schedule, bringing with them equipment and expertise that quickly restored navigation capabilities throughout the affected systems. But they also brought something else, a comprehensive analysis of Imperial infrastructure that revealed just how completely the Empire had become dependent on human technology. Dr. Marcus Webb, the lead human engineer, presented his findings to the Imperial Council with the same matter-of-fact professionalism that characterized all human interactions. The navigation failure was caused by incompatibilities between legacy Imperial systems and recent efficiency upgrades. The problem occurred because different components were updated at different times without comprehensive integration testing. To prevent similar failures in the future, the Webb continued, we recommend implementing unified system management protocols. This would involve centralizing control of all critical infrastructure to ensure compatibility and prevent cascade failures. He activated a holographic display showing the proposed management structure. Vextar studied the display with growing dismay. The proposed system would place human technicians in direct control of every major Imperial system. Navigation, communication, defense, and economic networks would all report to a central coordination center staffed primarily by Earth personnel. It was a comprehensive takeover disguised as a technical necessity. This level of centralization would essentially place the Empire under human administration, Vextar observed, his voice carefully controlled despite his inner turmoil. Such a fundamental change in governmental structure requires careful consideration of the political implications. Dr. Webb nodded understandingly. Your Majesty raises valid concerns about administrative autonomy. Earth has no desire to interfere with Imperial governance. However, the technical reality is that integrated systems require integrated management. The alternative is accepting the risk of future failures that could be even more catastrophic than what we just experienced. The debate that followed was futile, and everyone in the room knew it. General Krex argued for maintaining Imperial control over defense systems, but admitted that human shield technology and tactical systems had become irreplaceable. Ambassador Bex insisted on preserving economic independence, while acknowledging that removing human logistics systems would cause immediate collapse of interstellar trade. Ambassador Lyris provided the most honest assessment. Your Majesty, the Etherian communication networks cannot function without human enhancement technology. Our telepathic abilities have become so dependent on their amplification systems that reverting to natural capabilities would reduce our effectiveness by 90%. We no longer have the choice to refuse human involvement. As the discussion continued, Vextar realized that every major species in the Empire faced the same dilemma. They had all willingly accepted human improvements that made them more effective at their traditional roles. But those improvements had come with hidden costs. They were all more powerful than before, but only as long as humans continued to support their enhanced capabilities. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Outer Rim Tone. year after the navigation crisis that changed everything. Emperor Vextar stood once again before the crystalline mirror in his preparation chamber. The reflection that looked back at him wore the same crown of eternity, the same ceremonial robes, and carried the same official titles that had defined imperial authority for 3 millennia. But the being wearing those symbols understood that they now represented something entirely different from what his ancestors had built. Today marked the first anniversary of the Terran Guidance Protocols, the administrative framework that had emerged from humanity's takeover of imperial infrastructure. The occasion would be celebrated throughout the galaxy as the beginning of a new era of prosperity and cooperation. Vextar had come to understand that it truly was a new era, just not the one anyone had expected when they first welcomed human participation in galactic affairs. Captain Sarah Chen, now bearing the modest title of Galactic Coordination Director, had requested a private meeting to review the first year's achievements and discuss future developments. The fact that she now held regular private meetings with the Emperor would have been shocking a year ago. Today it was simply recognition of the reality that major decisions affecting the galaxy required her input to be viable. The meeting took place in the same chamber where Vextar had first realized the scope of human influence in his empire. The holographic displays that had once shown the warning signs of human integration now displayed the remarkable success of their openly acknowledged partnership. Economic indicators showed unprecedented prosperity, military readiness had never been higher, and diplomatic cooperation between species had reached levels that previous emperors could only have dreamed of achieving. The transformation has exceeded all projections. Chen reported with satisfaction as she reviewed the data. Trade efficiency has improved by 400%, conflict resolution time has decreased by 70%, and resource distribution has achieved near optimal efficiency throughout the galaxy. Every major species reports higher satisfaction with imperial governance than at any point in recorded history. Vextar studied the statistics with mixed emotions. The numbers were undeniably impressive, but they also confirmed what he had long suspected. The galaxy functioned better under human guidance than it ever had under traditional imperial rule. The success is remarkable, he acknowledged. But I find myself wondering whether this was always the intended outcome. Chen appeared to consider the question carefully before responding. Your Majesty, Earth's intentions have always been exactly what we stated, to contribute positively to galactic civilization. The specific form that contribution would take was never predetermined. We simply identified areas where human capabilities could provide improvements and offered our assistance. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. However, she continued, I will admit that human strategic planners anticipated that our involvement would likely become extensive once other species experience the benefits of cooperation. Human psychology emphasizes practical solutions and mutual benefit. We naturally tend to create systems that encourage continued partnership, rather than temporary assistance. It was the closest thing to an admission that Vextar had ever heard from her. The humans had not planned to conquer the galaxy, but they had structured their aid in ways that made continued dependence inevitable. They had offered genuine improvements that solved real problems. But those improvements had been designed to require ongoing human involvement to maintain their benefits. And the future? Vextar asked. What role does humanity envision for traditional imperial authority in this new galactic order? It was a question that went to the heart of his personal struggle with the transformation. He remained emperor in name and ceremony, but the substance of power had shifted to human coordinators and the species representatives who worked with them. Chen's response carried genuine respect for his position. Your Majesty, the imperial throne remains an essential symbol of galactic unity and continuity. Human guidance operates most effectively when it supports existing authority structures rather than replacing them. The Emperor provides legitimacy and stability that coordination networks cannot supply. She gestured toward the displays showing improved cooperation between species. Earth envisions a future where imperial authority and human coordination work together to achieve goals that neither could accomplish alone. You provide the vision and legitimacy of traditional leadership, while human systems provide the practical capabilities to implement that vision effectively. It was a diplomatic way of saying that he would remain a figurehead while humans handled the actual governance. The irony was not lost on Vextar, that this arrangement actually provided him with more influence than traditional emperors had enjoyed in many areas. His ceremonial approval was now required for major policy initiatives, giving him veto power over changes he found objectionable. Human coordinators actively sought his input on decisions affecting multiple species, recognizing that his perspective provided valuable insights into galactic politics. But it was influence without independence, power without autonomy. Every decision had to be compatible with human coordination systems. Every initiative had to fit within the framework of species cooperation that humans had established. He could shape the direction of galactic development, but only within boundaries defined by human concepts of efficiency and mutual benefit. The meeting was interrupted by a communication from the Outer Rim territories, where human coordinators were implementing the latest expansion of the guidance protocols. The message brought news that perfectly illustrated how completely the galaxy had transformed. 3 previously unknown species had made contact with galactic civilization and were requesting immediate inclusion in human coordination networks. They specifically asked for human guidance rather than traditional imperial integration, Chen reported with obvious satisfaction. Word has spread beyond our borders that species cooperating with Earth experience significant advantages in development and prosperity. These new civilizations want to begin their galactic participation with the most effective systems available. Vextar realized that this represented the future of galactic expansion. New species would not seek inclusion in the traditional empire. They would seek partnership with human coordination networks that happened to operate under imperial authority. The form of his ancestors' empire would be preserved, but its substance would continue evolving toward something his predecessors would not recognize. As the day progressed, Vextar met with representatives from the major species to review the year's achievements and plan future cooperation. Each meeting reinforced the same message: the galaxy had never been more prosperous, peaceful, or efficiently managed. Every species had benefited from human involvement, and none showed any desire to return to previous systems of governance. General Krex reported that military cooperation between species had reached unprecedented levels, with joint training exercises and shared technology creating the most effective defense force in galactic history. Human tactical coordination has transformed how we approach security threats, he admitted. Individual species remain responsible for their own forces, but coordinated response capabilities have made large-scale conflicts virtually impossible. Ambassador Bex delivered economic reports that showed similar transformation. Trade relationships that once required complex negotiations now function through automated coordination systems, he explained. Human logistics networks have eliminated most sources of commercial dispute by ensuring fair resource distribution and efficient transportation. Profit margins have increased for everyone while reducing costs for consumers. Ambassador Lyris provided the most philosophical perspective on the changes. The enhancement of our telepathic capabilities has allowed deeper understanding between species than was ever possible before, she observed. Human neural interface technology has not just improved our communication abilities. It has helped us develop new forms of empathy and cooperation that transcend traditional species barriers. That evening, Vextar walked alone through the gardens of the Imperial Palace, contemplating the nature of the transformation he had witnessed and participated in. The formal gardens remained exactly as they had been designed centuries ago, maintaining the traditions and symbols of imperial authority. But beyond the garden walls, a completely different galaxy was taking shape. Human coordination centers operated throughout the galaxy, staffed by representatives from dozens of species working together to solve problems and implement improvements. The old system of central imperial commands flowing down through rigid hierarchies had been replaced by networks of cooperation that responded to local needs while maintaining galactic coordination. The most remarkable aspect was how natural the new system felt to everyone involved. Species that had maintained hostile relationships for centuries now worked together on joint projects. Governments that had once competed for imperial favor now collaborated to achieve shared objectives. Even criminal organizations had found that cooperation with human mediators was more profitable than traditional illegal activities.